Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new webinar, the Get Together series with the EGSI, European Guild for Structural Integration. I'm here with Aleš Urbanczik. Hi, Aleš.
Hello.
Hello. So today's webinar is about, is a sort of follow-up what we've done last time with Aleš about the recipe and astrology, and Aleš is going to get us through other aspects of these, and you're also welcome again to ask questions, to be curious about this. At the end, I will tell you more about what's up coming next. We have some new things we're gonna show and share with you, some new conferences. Also, the last one of April, it's something we want to share with you. So welcome you all, and Aleš, I think we can start.
Okay. Fine. Fine with me. So welcome everybody, and welcome everybody in Europe. It's nearly getting close to evening here, so I'll say good evening to Europe. I will say happy lunchtime in Brazil, and good morning to the people out in California or in the Midwest in the United States. I have to say that this whole series of webinars has really made me realize how beautifully diverse our guild community is. I mean, if I think about David Davis with his offering his historical perspective, Nilsi, her teaching expertise, Bert Schmitz, the meditation, Fulvio, the poetry, Mary Bond, the somatic experience, and me adding to it concepts, different concepts, various concepts of looking at the recipe. I think we're in really good shape, and we're really a wonderfully colorful and diverse community. So thank you for that. I want to tell you a little bit just before we start in getting into the astrology about my experience with this basic series. I got rolfed for the first time by Bert Schmitz, who did the meditation webinar a couple of weeks ago. And at that time, I was really in an incredibly bad shape, especially psychologically, because I had, in a really stupid yoga accident, I had twisted my neck in a way that my whole head had totally seized up. There was no muscle in the head I could actively relax anymore. And there was nobody that was willing to do anything about it. But fortunately, my knee hurt after a meniscus surgery. And it was the meniscus surgery, it was like 5 years before, but the knee still hurt. And because of the neck stuff, I was really ready to shoot myself. This may sound funny now, but it wasn't funny at the time at all. I was really on the verge of committing suicide. And Bert, at the time, what he did, he took me through 10 sessions of structural integration. And the knee was kind of a sideshow. That was something that got resolved fairly quickly. But the psychological impact and this journey that I had during those 10 sessions was so amazing that I thought, well, if I can get this far in only 10 hours of work, maybe I shouldn't kill myself, but go in that direction for another 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So this was back probably 1986 or something like that, 87. And I've been practicing. After that, I went to the basic training in the United States, lived there for a while. And I've been practicing this recipe nearly my entire life. 90% of my work is basic series work. And I'm telling you this because the second time this basic series had a real strong influence on my life was in 2010, because a lady came to me after a serious neck injury after a skiing accident. And the medical prognosis was that she may be in a wheelchair if she doesn't move very carefully, because she could do a stupid movement at night, they said, and it would just end up in a wheelchair. What I did was 10 series of structural integration, and it got her on a path, and she's a Pilates teacher now. Now, the important part of this story is that her husband was so glad that this happened that he said, A, I want to learn how to do this. B, I want you to teach this. And C, I'm going to sell the company that I own at the moment, and I'm going to devote my time to this and found a school that you can teach this. So this is the reason why we're here today. And so nobody has ever needed to convince me that this basic series is one of the most valuable things that we have within the work of structural integration. So, last time, and
thank you, Aleš, for this story. I heard it. It's not the first time I hear it, but it touched me a lot every time I hear it.
Well, it's been my life since then. It's really been my life, and I'm honored. I'm honored that Bert, but also all of my teachers, David Davies, Niels de Silveira, Neil Powers, are now on the faculty of this organization that I'm honored to preside at the moment. Okay, so can we have a look at the pie chart again? We had a look at this last 10 days ago, and I was trying to show you in this how the soul has an evolutionary journey around this chart, starting in Aries and going all the way to Pisces, once around the whole chart from left to right in a counterclockwise manner. No, the other way around. The other way around. Now, let's have a look at how the evolutionary journey of a 10 series could look like with respect to this. And I think it's important that the mood that you have in a session, the mood for an hour, is important to keep in mind. I want to make it once again clear that we're not working on the basis that planets have rays that influence something, and the planetary position at any moment in time does not have anything to do with how you do a session. These are symbols, and the symbols carry in some ways more information than you could maybe express verbally. And if you think in larger concepts like this, then I think it will influence how you work. And these larger concepts will then translate to the client through your touch. This does not have to be verbal at all, but it's an attitude that you bring to the work. So, someone comes for a first session of structural integration. And this person, we're going to look at this pie chart for a moment at the green triangles. So you see at the bottom, we have the sign of Cancer and the moon. So this person that comes has a certain persona, a certain ego structure. And this ego structure has been greatly influenced and influenced by what is on the other side of the green triangle. If you look up at the top of the chart, by Capricorn and Saturn. So it's the conventions of the family structure that the person lived in, the conventions of the society he lives in. The person will act differently if he lives in California, or if he lives in Arkansas, or lives in China, or in Europe. So this is the setting. Somebody comes to us and has a own ego structure influenced by a societal structure, a history around him. And these two things are basically ingrained in that person's system, in the movement patterns and in the fascial structure of their bodies. So we encounter this person for the first time, We have to
Aleš, sorry, just a second. Maybe you touch the microphone with the papers, so sometimes there is a noise. Just to let you know this.
I'll try and do this different. I had to jot some things down so that I don't lose track of what I'm talking about here. So we've defined the first session, or actually Emmett defined it that way with Andrew Young together, as being a plutonic session. So we'll move in the pie chart for a moment to the red over there, Pluto and Scorpio. The things that you would associate with Pluto and Scorpio is the soul itself. You would associate power, dominance, instinct, survival. By extension of survival of the species, for instance, you would associate sexuality with it, procreation. And Scorpio has a brilliance and a charm. It's ravishing about it. It's really a very, very powerful sign. Now the client comes, and I think in every one of us there is a conflicting desire. There's on the one hand the desire to keep things as they are. We're not by nature totally investigative people usually. But there is another desire to evolve through change. And these two desires, I think, in everybody, have a certain amount of conflict with each other. Because the client comes to you for the first time, the latter, so the will to change, will be probably dominant. So you as a practitioner don't really need to push it. They are already in a process when they get to your door. You just have to have the role of a humble midwife. So this is the part of the practitioner. This is how they come in. Now, the Plutonian part of you as a practitioner, or me as a practitioner, you have a knowledge of the power of this work. Power is a Plutonic function. Either from your own experience, just remember your first structural integration session, and also from already having done a lot of sessions and witnessed the effect. Which brings me in session 1 to this very important aspect of the relationship between the practitioner and the client. I think there is in structural integration a natural power imbalance in that relationship. So Pluto is an instinctual aspect, and the person will want to, the client will want to evaluate what this experience is going to be about. They may have heard things about it. They may have had stories about it, but they don't really know, because this is something you cannot intellectually describe. You can only experience structural integration. So the main thing would be for a first session, or one of the main things would be safety and orientation. Giving somebody the feeling that change is possible, Pluto, and that it is possible in a safe environment. Keeping all antennas active. This is probably not even verbal. I don't think you need to talk about this so much, but it is something that you have to keep in mind, that the person really wants to evaluate what is this experience going to be about, and this is going to lay the foundation for the entire series. Now, Pluto also relates to power. We've talked about that part, but it also relates to glamour. It's charming. Keep in mind, fascia is primarily at first resistant to stretch and will react by contracting if it's simply overpowered. So the thing to do would be use not the power aspect of Pluto, but you need to charm the fascia into changing. And the last thing about session 1 I would want to say is that Pluto is an incredibly sexual archetype. So I think you need to get any sexual association out of the way immediately. If there is any hint of anything of that going on, either from the side of the client to you or from you to the client, I think you can forget the whole evolutionary journey that you're about to embark on. Okay? This, again, I don't think needs to be necessarily verbally. I think the attitude that you have towards the client will be transmitted through your touch to the other person's nervous system. And this will define the relationship for the entire series. But bear in mind, this first session does not mean that you need to caress the other person, okay? By no means. This is the spirit of the first hour, is rebirth, is excitement, is energy, is something the person has never felt before. And it is important that this first hour be exciting and not some dream things where you float around in Never Never Land or on a cloud or something like that. This would not be the spirit of the first hour. I'm going to take a break after about 3 sessions for questions and back and forth, okay? So I'll just go through the first 3 sessions first, because they, in astrology, they relate to these outer, what you call transpersonal planets, and we'll see how that, again, relates to the astrological concept. So we'll go to session 2, and the client now comes back and has usually had a very profound experience in session 1. And remember, there's this conflicting desire, keep things as they are or evolve through change. And they've had an incredible experience, but now it would be time to formulate a vision for the work. This vision is governed in astrology by Neptune, and this is why we assign Neptune to this session. That vision doesn't have to be 100% clear. It needs to be a direction of work. And metaphorically, session 2, you start walking towards this vision. I think the vision that we have to offer is finding the line. A line that extends through the body up to the far stars and down all the way to the center of the earth. And you can imagine the client or a human being suspended on that axis, a little bit like a marionette or a puppet on a string. And if you want the physical manifestation for that vision, for that walking in that direction, it would be that you would put the main strings for that puppet in walking, you would put it on the knees. So the knees going straight forward and straight back, starting that process in session 2, will let us move slowly towards the vision of that line. Now, I think it is important to formulate a little bit of vision, because everybody, maybe not everybody, but most people like to have visions in their lives. If they do not have any visions at all about their lives, or about the future, about what they want to do, they sometimes fill in that void with either some very, very out far religions, or they would maybe go to drugs or to alcohol. All of these are ways to transcend reality. The transcendence that we have to offer is to find that line. And in session 2, by moving the knees straight forward and straight back, we start walking towards it. So that was session 2. Session 3, we're going to go to Uranus and Aquarius. And if you look at the pie chart at the very top, actually not at above the pie chart there, you have all the planets, and we will be going in order from left to right, from the most outside parts of the solar system to the most inner parts, bit by bit and session by session. Now in session 3, this ego structure of Cancer and the moon that we started off with has been cracked already open a little bit by the work on the superficial fascia of the first 2 sessions. So after session 3, people will usually perceive themselves, very different than before session 1 already. and B, they will perceive themselves or start to perceive themselves as different from everybody else. So they will have start breaking that in the green pie, the Capricorn Saturn aspect that we started off with, the boundaries, the laws, the limitations of the societal structures that they were confined in until then. And they will start perceiving themselves as an individual and not part of a herd. And doing things like everybody else will start being a little bit like a thing from the past. It may not be totally safe there yet. We need the other sessions for that. But it's definitely a feeling from, I feel very, very different than before and different like everybody else. So the Uranus aspect, Uranus is freedom from the known. It is detachment, it is new ideas. Uranus is like a lightning bolt, and the lightning bolt of the third hour is the quadratus lumborum. That is the element that really, that spark in the body that keeps you detached from everything else. And with this section 3, we basically complete the work on the sleeve, symbolized by these 3 outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. And then we'll get into the personal planetary principles in sessions 4 to 7. Because we need to, being detached from everything else is fine. Being an individual is fine. But you need to find the inner concept of the line that you actually can live that and not just be different, but have an own inner structure. And that's what we're going to start in session 4. So, questions or comments?
Oh, again, pay attention to the paper. There's a question from Amy. Can you speak more? About the power, the client practitioner power imbalance you mentioned before. That I was going to ask the same thing also. So you mentioned this imbalance between the client and the practitioner. Can you tell us more?
Well, I think you have to be very mindful of that, and it's just there. It is just there by the nature of somebody being half naked in front of you who is clothed, and you basically knowing what is going to happen in the session, the other person not knowing it. You knowing what the progression of the sessions will be, the other person has no clue where this is going to go. So there is a knowledge imbalance, and you need to, I think, guide people slowly into that without, no, I'm not going to say without. I'm going to say, for me, it's a little bit like, a 10 series is a little bit like taking someone on a journey. And the only difference is I have a map, and I've been in that forest before. And I've got a flashlight with me, and I can sometimes point to a tree or to a bird on a tree or something that I see and point it out to the person. Okay? So not to dwell on the power imbalance, but to try and calm it down, to let the other person have influence, to work with movement, to let the person come at you and not do something with the other person. So essentially to work in a person and with a person and not on the person.
So Amy, let us know if this is answering your question. And Melanie, she's asking if the colors you choose for the pie are meaningful, and if there are colors associated for every hour.
Well, you would be able to associate color with a planetary principle. What was important for me in this chart is to show the opposites, so that the Cancer and Capricorn are shadows of each other, or Taurus and Scorpio are shadows of each other. So I chose colors, to demonstrate those lines. And in so far there, I had to pick one. Usually you would not choose for Aries blue, but you might choose blue for Venus. So I picked the Venus side there. You would choose Pluto with that color, you could do that. In Gemini, in the yellow one, I chose the color for Gemini that you usually use. And for Uranus, definitely the orange. So it's a mix. It's not quite what you would usually do in an hour, but it is an emphasis that I wanted you to see the opposites, okay?
So Scott is saying, for me, second hour was always a difficult session until I gave up on the specifics, Saturn, and went with the flow and allowed the fascia to find its own journey, Neptune.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. This is what, in some ways, you know, one of the quotes in the intro was by Ida Rolf, that there is, at some point, you have to know the theory and you have to know the anatomy and all that, but this is not what guides the session. What guides the session is the relationship to the client and the journey that you do together.
Okay, I don't see it. If there are other questions coming, please let us know. You can also raise your hand. You know, this could be interactive also with your voice. So if you want to chat, just raise the hand, pushing the button. Aleš, you want to keep going?
Sure. No, we'll get to the. So we've covered the. We've got the freedom. Okay.
Okay.
We have the freedom, but we don't have the line yet. And in session 4, we're going to introduce order. Before session 1, the order, Saturn, was defined by the boundaries, laws, limitations, the societal structures that the person had before. What we're going to try and do in session 4 on a let's say on an astrological symbolic level is to create order along the line. So within the person and not the outside, not superimpose something, but let an inner order emerge from within that person. And the sign for it is Saturn. So we're continuing something of that vision that we started in session 2 of finding that line and giving the line structure. We're going to get structure for the legs by straightening them more out, by getting the knees even more going straight forward and straight back. But we're also going to start getting structure and order for the pelvic floor, which then will mean support and structure for the whole inside of the body, for the organs. And Emmett said one thing which I think is really important to keep in mind, that the Uranian freedom we had in session 3 has to be to a certain ground limited and structured. So he said, freedom is the creative appropriation of limitations. Okay? I think this is a very, very, very good sentence for the 4th hour. And it is an hour. I mean, Saturn is probably the planet, if you talk to people, this is the most, or the least popular one, the least popular planet, because there's a harshness to it. People don't like being told what they do. They don't like limitations. But to find that line, we need certain amount of inner structure to find it.
Yeah, can you repeat the sentence, please?
Freedom is the creative appropriation of limitations. Okay?
Dana was asking.
Freedom is the creative appropriation of limitations. Okay? Now, of course, in classic astrology, the Saturn rules the knees. So, and if there is a session for the knees, then it's probably session 4, where we get really deep into that. So, we have started finding this line by ordering things in the legs. And we have started creating a new personal or individual order, and not the outside one, not the boundaries and limitations of society. And now we need to, in session 5, create a new concept for that line. And maybe even a new belief system. The old belief system of people is usually that the legs start at the hip joints. Now, in our concept, the legs hang from the crura of the diaphragm. And in session 5, you really allow that person, the client, to explore that concept and to actually feel it. The planetary principle of new concepts, of new philosophies, of new ideas is Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is not only concepts, but it's also the largest planet in our solar system, and it governs expansion of any kind. And you will probably know or remember that the expansion on the inside of the body, the lift that you have, people are tall and exuberant. They're usually joyful. After session 4, everybody's pissed off in a class. After session 5, everybody just wants to go dancing. So this is that balance between Saturn and Jupiter. And before the 19th century, all religious pursuits and endeavors were related to Jupiter, spiritual growth. So the new concept is that the psoas can be used in movement. It supports the lumbar spine, but the psoas also reacts very sensitively to any kind of stress or fear. In some yogic traditions, they would go as far as to say that if you ever reach complete voluntary control over the psoas at any moment in time, this amounts to being enlightened. Okay? So this is really a totally new concept. I mean, you don't have to talk about this to your client, but if you bear the enormity of the concept of the psoas a little bit in mind, it will probably keep you from just putting your fist in there and grinding away on it. So we have this quest to invite change from the inside to find the line, and we're going to go to session 6.
Remember the microphone, please.
I'll be mindful of the microphone. I'm sorry. Okay. So in session 6, everybody knows that what we do is to free the sacrum, free the holy bone. Free it from what? We'll free it so that it can become part of the spine. Now, this is the let's say the outer layer of this idea of the 6th session, but you will find that if you listen to Ida Rolf, what she used to talk about in session 6, a little closer, if you dig a little bit deeper, she was after something much, much different than that. And maybe you can show the ganglions, Dario.
This one, here it is.
And I'm not sure whether this is taught so much anymore. We mention it, but it is so far out that usually we don't talk about it too much, and I don't think other schools talk about it at all. Ida Rolf was interested in something completely different. She looked at the body as a bioelectric unit. So for her in session 6, the influence or the impact of the work on the ganglion of impar was very important. The ganglion of impar is on the inside, the retroperitoneal, just in front of the coccyx. And it is a single ganglion which combines the 2 sympathetic trunks, the left and the right trunk of the nervous system. And she was interested in continuing this in session 7 up to what is called the ganglion of Ribe at the very top, which in the yogic tradition, the ganglion of Ribe is between the eyes or inside the skull, in the area where the yogis would call what they would call the third eye. And of course, you know, if you know a little bit about yoga and about the ideas of the Kundalini awakening and all that, then you will see how this blends in nicely. Now, the ganglion of impar in session 6 is something that you will find in anatomy books. This is a fairly well-known ganglion. The ganglion of Rib on the other side is much more difficult to find. Part of the difficulty in finding it on the internet is that in the Rolfing community, this has simply been spelt wrong. Usually it has been Americanized, and it's spelled in the Rolfing community R-E-B-E-S. But the name comes from a French anatomist of the 19th century, François Ribes. So it's actually not even the ganglion of Ribes, it's the ganglion of Ribes in français. And this is one of the reasons why you can't find it on the internet. You can find the Rolfing sites around that, but you can actually, if you put it right in the right terminology, you can find it. And nowadays there's anatomists that claim that it doesn't even exist. I can't speak to that. I'm not an anatomist. Maybe it exists in the people that are enlightened and it doesn't exist in all the rest. I have no idea. But anyway, this is what Ida Rolf is about. The session 6 and 7 were as much about freeing the sacrum and the head as they were about balancing the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So in astrology, we have Mars, and I think Mars would be fairly clear to everybody, even by association, what Mars means. And then we have Venus, which has two aspects in astrology. You see on the pie chart, Venus at the bottom corner there in Taurus. It has a survival aspect of creating the means that you can survive, of nourishment, of money, or some stuff like that nowadays. But it also has the part of Libra, which is basically diplomacy, which would be the other side. So you can see how Mars and Venus both can balance this difficult dance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. And this is why Mars and Venus are both the rulers of the 6th hour. Okay, can we have a quick look at the Kundalini thing? Just that you get an idea of there. Okay, this is usually, you see here in the yogic tradition of the Kundalini awakening, you see these two ganglions mentioned, and they would, if you get the spine upright enough and continuous enough and open enough, then there is a direct connection between the ganglion of impar and the ganglion of Rib, and you maybe have a Kundalini awakening. Okay, so which brings us, of course, to session 7. And
there's a question on can we make available the
yeah, sure.
Okay, we can make the picture available for people that is asking. Yeah, that's it.
So in session 7, we're so far on this quest of the line that we're finding for this individual. We've got support from session 4. We have a new concept of being in session 5. We have a relative balance of nervous system responses in session 6. And now in session 7, we need to find a way that actually this person on this line can communicate and maybe pass on the experience to others, or be able to articulate things. And this is why this is, of course, ruled by Mercury. And if we look at Mercury again at the pie chart, you can see Mercury also has two sides in astrology. It has the sign down in the yellow first of left brain communication, of being able to speak and to communicate to other people. And it reigns in astrology, the Mercury reigns the mouth and the tongue. Okay, this is classic astrology. It's nothing to do with our view of this, but it's a wonderful, let's say, coincidence. So the mouth and the tongue, But it also has the other aspect coming from the right side there, from you see, from Virgo. And I think you will find that even the strongest ego will be humbled by the work on the 7th hour and by the intraoral and intranasal work. So there the Mercury aspect of humbleness and comes in, so that this line that we're building or we're helping this person to emerge will not go over the top and just think, oh, now I'm the greatest. No, 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 no. Okay, we have a line, but it's humble. So this is where we put in Mercury. And hopefully we have now created that feeling of a line for the person. And we'll see how this goes to session 8, but I'll take a short break if you have any questions.
So while we were waiting for a question, can I ask you? I mean, so there's multiple. The sequence we're following on the chart is not sequential. You
No.
said from the planet point of view is the order from the distance from the Earth, right? But not on the planet. And then some session have multiple planets.
Yeah, well, this is because the Venus and Mercury are planets that reign different signs and they have different aspects. So we actually have 12 signs in astrology, but only 10 planets. If you exclude the, let's say, Chiron and things like that, if you just take the classical astrology.
Okay. There's a question, is session 6 associated with both Venus and Mars?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the balancing of the two, the balancing of the aggression of Mars, or the force of Mars, the fight, if you will, and the fight and flight response, and the let's say the diplomacy of the situation, where you calm down the situation, which would be more of a Venus function.
Okay, so there's a similar from Color question is, does our 6 then relate to Taurus, Aries, and Libra?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't see any other question. We can probably go on.
So let's have a look one more time at the chart, at the pie chart.
Sure.
So you remember we started off, we had a person that was on that green field originally, a person with an ego structure, with a persona that was governed mainly by the boundaries and laws and limitations and societal structures of family, etc., etc. And we started introducing a new concept of boundaries, and those boundaries was finding that line. So in sense, if we're very lucky, we have now in these deep sessions helped this person find their line. And in session 8, we can go back to Cancer and the moon, to the green triangle at the bottom, but we have a new ego structure. We have a new persona now. And this is why session 8 you would put at the moon, but on a different, let's say on a different level than what we started off with. And we have hopefully helped the person substitute the limitations that they had otherwise from the laws and limitations of societal structures by a new concept of individual line. And in session 9, we can help this person to creatively explore this new personality in movement. And so the sun reigns the 9th hour. And if you look at the pie chart and you see that the sun is usually in the Leo is the astrological sign related to the sun. Usually the sun gets a little bit, out of itself and is kind of proud of itself, and in this enormous creativity thinks it's the greatest. This is why you need to do a good 7th hour. There has to be a certain amount of humility in this 9th hour. And so by all means, if you have a 9th hour and the jaw is not okay and the mouth is not okay, absolutely go back in and see that this structure doesn't get overboard. And in a 10th session, we would basically release this person into the world. So the sign that is left is, if you will, the earth itself. And you would be able to spread the word about the experience and live your new life. If we look at the pie chart one last time, you remember we started off in the green field, and up there at the very top we had the boundaries and laws and limitations of the societal structure. So if we're lucky in a 10 series, and if we've done a good job and the relationship was good and the client was ready to go that route, all of these things are, I think, indispensable. You may have helped that person to transcend that green evolutionary triangle into the orange one, which is the next one, into the Aquarian triangle, with completely new ideas that come from the sense of a line, from totally new concepts of the world. And in some people you may even find that they will be able to go one step further into the Piscean realm there, where they experience this whole process as incredibly spiritual and visionary, to a point that they find an inner sense of religion within themselves and are not dependent on whatever societal church structures or things like that mean to him, but find an inner religiosity. So that would be the basic series as an evolutionary path, symbolized in astrological symbology, as Emmett and Andrew Young figured it out.
So while we're waiting for some question, can I ask you something? I'm fascinated by the definition you gave from Emmett about the freedom, no? So, which is actually is also, I would rephrase, but tell me if this is what you said. And if you take ownership of your own structure with its limitation, but if you take ownership of what it is, you can express yourself through that structure. So that's the only way you can express yourself, owning your own structure with the boundaries that structure has. Yeah. And when I say structure, I mean it's the structure, the physical structure, which also mimes and reflects my psychology, my spiritual capabilities and whatever. But until I don't own it, I cannot be free. So it's you have to get deep into your body to get free from your body. And there's many ways of saying this. I'm really fascinated by this. And also I was thinking also about Nelson Mandela, when he wrote this little poem Invictus, it was in this very narrow cell in prison, and he was able to express his own structure.
Yeah. I think that's definitely the, let's say, the psychological or the inner life aspect to it. I think in terms of the physical aspect, you could just add that people who meditate, for instance, they don't usually meditate in a random position. They would find a position where the spine can be upright. So there's a limitation there. There is a certain amount of instruction there, an order there, how you do that and how you find, if you will, that connection between the ganglion of impar and the ganglion of rib.
So, Aleš, they're asking if you can list the 10 planet signs. I'm going to show the chart again, and if you can clear again session 8, 9, I think, and 10 correspond which planets. So we can very briefly go through this. You will receive this file as well. So the planets are on top. Right.
The planets are on top, and we can go from left to right. Pluto is session 1, Neptune session 2, Uranus session 3, Saturn session 4, Jupiter session 5, Mars and Venus session 6, Mercury session 7, Moon session 8, the Sun is session 9, and session 10 is we leave the person and we say goodbye. They're off to the Earth.
Okay. And some of these planets correspond to more than one sign.
Yes, yes. Mercury and Venus do.
So I'm finding this personal freedom within the quarantine requirements.
Of course.
Yeah,
the quarantine is Saturnian limitation, clearly.
Yeah.
And by the way, people have been incredibly creative. I mean, if you look at the artwork that's been done on the internet and stuff, it's actually quite amazing what's happened.
Does session 10 have an astrological sign relation? I think we covered.
Yeah, that we talked about that. That's the Earth.
The Earth is the planet, but there is no sign like Libra or something.
No, there is no sign. This is outside of the system.
Okay. Sorry, Mars is also the ancient ruler of Scorpio. Scott is saying.
Yeah, it is. Is there, Scott? Is there anything more you would want to add to that? I mean, it is the ancient ruler of Scorpio, but I'm not sure how to respond to that at the moment.
And Scott, if you want to chat, raise your hand, and I'll activate your microphone. It's the easiest way.
Oh yeah, of course, it comes into play in session.
It would be nice to chat.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. That's session 6 is definitely a transformative session as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Emmett talking about the shock point in the sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember these parts, or can you tell us something about this?
Well, I think there is the shock point. One big shock point is usually session 1.
Yeah, I remember 1, 4, and 7 probably.
Yeah,
and also
1, 4, and 7. The Pluto, I mean, this transformatory aspect where you really get out and feel this is something really different than I've ever experienced before. Session 4, of course, the pelvic floor and the adductors and the whole inside of the legs. That Saturnian. Saturn is also a principle that brings up old stuff in astrology. So if you have a Saturn transit, then you're usually asked to review things in your life and to reorganize them. And so in session 4, you will find that sometimes that people get angry or get sad after the session because stuff from their past will emerge. And of course, session 7, people, that's the sign of Mercury, that's the Virgo sign of Mercury. Probably the sign in astrology, not the planet, but the sign that people also don't like very much is usually Virgo. Because Virgo is humble. It is humble to a point where you can really just say, okay, I'm just a servant of the universe or something like that. And usually people have a difficult time in accepting that this has to be part of the system as well. So when you have this aspect of working in somebody's mouth and in somebody's nose, and people are really thinking, oh wow, I mean, this is so deep, and somebody else has the courage to go there, then they're usually very, very humble afterwards. So that's this, kind of a break point in the recipe often too.
Fulvio says he remembers Dr. Ross saying something like, let me read it. There has been a big effort to bring men on the moon in this age, and I put all my energies to bring men on the Earth.
Yeah.
There is a question on, does Gemini relate to any of these sessions?
Well, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, so it's not the sign itself, it would be the planetary principle of Mercury, and that would reign session 7.
So Lucas is saying it seems that all other planets are around us somewhere in the sky, but Earth is where we are. So session 10 is where we are at 10.
This is why it's a process, and this is why I think it's also important to let people go again after 10 sessions. You know, that to finish something and maybe pick it up a month later and not just keep going.
Scott finds that sometimes also session 3 can be a shock point for some people. Probably those that are overwhelmed by the new possibilities of Uranus, things that are not as they had believed.
Well, I think I told this story last time, I'll just quickly repeat it. The most radical version of this, what you're saying, was a client that I had in California, a man who rang me up after session 3 and told me that he couldn't continue because he deeply felt that if he continued this process, he would have to get divorced, and that was not possible for him at this moment in time. So freedom from the known would have been freedom from his family, from his relationship, from the mortgage that he had to pay, possibly from the bigger family that he had, and he didn't want to do that. So that can be a shock, yes.
Okay. Is there something you want to ask, guys, or we can probably, Aleš, do you think we covered what you wanted to cover?
Oh yeah, I've covered what I wanted to cover.
And Amy, she's asking, had you discussed the freedom from the know within?
Well, no. Well, I did in that moment when he called me up. Amy, I don't usually talk about these principles verbally with people because people do not. It would prolong the session to an extent which would be absurd, and people are not usually interested in astrology. But I do warn them sometimes that something might happen in that direction. And I did talk about that with that person at the time on the phone. And I said, okay, I think this is great that you make a clear decision. This is not necessarily everybody is ready for this process at every point in his life.
Okay, she's saying thank you, perfect. So I think we can wrap up. I want to share with you something for the next webinars we're organized. So there have been quite of confusion around the registration process. The link you have is valid throughout the 4 webinars we've been published. So next one, Caroline Agnissen, will be next week on Tuesday, and then we will be concluding this part with the same registration on Thursday, and David Davis is going to be the next on Thursday. Then we need to hold on. We need to go and do another registration. We're thinking how to do this to simplify the thing. But Neil Power is going to be on the 28th of April, embracing the mystery, and we have organized this one. So we're going to have all our panelists so far met, and we're going to have a discussion. It's going to be a round table. General talk is about structural integration of the experience we have with structural integration. So we're going to, this is going to be on the 30th of April, okay? And we hope you enjoy these chats with us, and we are definitely having a lot of fun staying with you and sharing this path. This is our work, our love for this work, and having you sharing your love of the work with us.
And I'm just see that Tammy wants to know whether this is going to has been recorded, and Of course it has, and it will be on YouTube and on Facebook and on our webpage sometime later today.
Okay, so thank you all. Thank you. Thank you, Aleš.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.